So one of the beautiful things about teaching verse by verse through the scripture is that every once in a while you stumble upon a text that you would otherwise have dodged and gone, nope, I'm skipping that one. Because it has the potential to offend people and it has the potential to be misunderstood, or there are wide views and opinions on what it says. And so it's easier as a preacher if you're preaching to just dodge it and go, nope, I'm sticking to the easy stuff. And we have no luxury if we're doing verse by verse. So today we are in John chapter 2 and Jesus' first miracle in the wedding at Cana. And the sermon is titled Jesus the Winemaker, which ought to be controversial because there's a lot of different opinions on this. So we are going to attempt to look at this text from John the Apostle's perspective and why he writes it this way and what he wants us to learn about who this Messiah is. And we're going to be in John chapter 2. And if you would pray with me before we dive in. Father in heaven, I thank you for your grace that brings us here and that you have included this text in the scripture. And Lord, there are wide views on it. I pray that today you would allow me to faithfully handle the text. Lord, I pray that it would speak meaning into our lives and that you would transform us into the image of Christ because of it. Lord, I pray that as we handle controversial things, Lord, that there is an openness to the Spirit of God moving in our hearts and that you would just open our eyes to the truth. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. John chapter 2, beginning in verse 1, says, "On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' Jesus said to her, 'Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come.' His mother said to the servants, 'Whatever he says to you, do it.' Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. And Jesus said to them, 'Fill the water pots with water.' So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, 'Draw out some of the water and take it to the head waiter. Or draw out some of it now and take it to the head waiter.' So they took it to him. When the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, 'Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, he serves the poorer wine. But you have kept the good wine until now.' This is the beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him." May God bless the reading of his word. So herein we get the first miracle that Jesus does. We haven't even finished calling the disciples yet. They're starting to grow. We've named the first 4. John has named the first 4. And we talked about that last week. So we got Philip and Andrew, Nathaniel, and Peter. Right? Those are the first 4. John conspicuously does not name himself. So at the same time Peter and Andrew are called, Jesus calls John the Apostle and his brother James. John is the writer of this gospel and he doesn't describe his own calling. Okay, but those 2 guys are also in the mix at this point. There's 6 of them. Okay, so we're up to half and we haven't called the rest. And Jesus is the very, very beginning of his ministry. And he's in Cana. Cana is in just about 8 miles north of Nazareth. And what we know about this is that what's unique about John is that John tends to include things like festivals. And one of the things that we see here is Jesus going to a wedding. Now, how many of y'all like weddings? We love weddings. If you're getting married, invite me. I'm coming. Not just because of the cake. Now, the cake is a perk. But I'm coming. Because I like weddings. They've always been a fun deal. Because you realize that on a wedding day, everybody's happy? When was the last time you went to a wedding and people were boo-hooing in the pews because somebody was getting married? I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some happy tears. My father-in-law cried a few of them. And we got it on camera, so it is documented. Like, those are happy tears. These are happy tears, you know. But generally, everybody's happy. Like, a wedding is this family celebration, like, with your family and your closest friends, and everybody comes together to cheer you on because they love you and they're excited about this new venture in your life, right? And we're all excited. Like, the weddings in the first century were actually not that different. Now, the difference is the length. So here, we watching one, you know, like we got one-day weddings, okay? That generally is the American culture is one day. Now, the reason for that is because they cost a heck of a lot of money, and we ain't got any more than that, you know. So we can afford one day. Like, in the first century, if you could afford a big wedding, you did a big wedding, and like you had the whole village. Like, and with that, like, it went from anywhere from 3 days to a week. Like, it was not uncommon for wedding celebrations to last an entire week. Like, so we actually don't know if this is the first day of the wedding, the second or the third day of the wedding. We're not entirely told in the text which day of the wedding it is, but odds are it's not the first day. I mean, what we do know is that Jesus' mother is there. Like, why? We don't exactly know. Like, Jesus' mother could be there because she's a friend of the family. She's a friend of the bridegroom. She's a friend of the bride. Like, she could be helping with the catering based on what she's doing. Like, I mean, she may have had a side gig where she helped with foods at events. Like, and so, but Mary is there. Like, and Jesus and his disciples are also invited. At this point, we also know the last disciple that got called was Nathaniel. We know that Nathaniel is from Cana. Like, so this is his hometown as well. So there's a chance that he's invited. And so, hey, Jesus is invited. His mom is going, y'all, come on, let's go. This is a community celebration. We're all going to the party. Like, one of the things that I believe John wants us to see here is the humanity of Christ. Like, he does the same things that we do. Like, hey, there's a wedding. Let's go. We're all going to the party. We're all going to celebrate. Jesus might not even have known the couple. Like, he might even have been a wedding crasher. Now, his mother's there, so there's a chance that this is a distant cousin. There's a chance that he had some relatives involved. There's also a chance that Jesus is along for the ride, doesn't know him. Hey, we're going to a wedding. Let's go celebrate. Let's go party. We're going to have a good time. Because weddings are a good time. Like, they're intended to be a celebration of the union of God to his people. Like, they were always intended to be a picture of Christ and the church, of God and his people. And so they're this big fun celebration. And when they get to this celebration, somewhere in the middle of the party, the wine ran out. And Jesus' mother comes and says, they have no wine. Mary is concerned. Like, we have a problem. This is likely a day or 2 days into the wedding, if not the week into the wedding, you know. And like, at some point during this wedding feast, they run out of wine. Like, and Jesus' mom comes. This is a bit of a crisis, and she comes with some urgency, and she says, Jesus, like, they have no wine. Like, and Jesus turns to her and he addresses her, and he says, woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come. Now, what's interesting here is the way that he addresses her. He doesn't say mom, okay? He says woman. Now, in 21st century American dialect, that's probably not the best rendering. I mean, yes, that's a faithful rendering of what the Greek says, but it's not a faithful rendering of the idiom here. Like, the idiom here is more like ma'am, madam. It is in good manners, we say yes ma'am and no ma'am. That's good manners, right, children? Like, and we say yes mama and yes daddy. And when to others we say yes ma'am and no ma'am. Like, that's the shortened abbreviated version of madam, by the way. If you didn't know that, we took the D out. It's ma'am, it's madam. Okay? Yes madam, yes ma'am. And this is the same idiom. Like, it's a polite form of address. So when he says woman, he's saying ma'am. Like, now he addresses her as ma'am, not mama, not mother. He addresses her as ma'am. Like, what does that have to do with us? Like, Jesus is a little bit hands-off. Like, his essence is, Okay, my hour has not yet come, which is a phrase that's going to be repeated regularly through the book of John. My hour has not yet come. Okay, that Jesus isn't ready for the entire world to know that he's the Messiah yet. Like, he started calling his disciples. He got a half a dozen of them. We're halfway there to the calling of the disciples. We're right at the beginning of his ministry. And his hour has not yet come. The hour for the world to know that he's the Messiah isn't here yet. Like, that doesn't come for about 3 more years. So this phrase, my hour has not yet come, is going to be repeated over and over, even though this is the start of his ministry. The hour to which he refers is the hour of his crucifixion, the hour of his revelation as the Son of God. Like, and he's like, what is this? Isn't my problem. This isn't my event. Like, I'm just a guest, and it's a little bit of what you want me to do about it. Like, and in a polite, kind-hearted, submitting to his mama kind of way. Like, but there's a distinction here. Because this is also Jesus not outright initially submitting to his mom. Like, you see him as an adult man here, as a 30-year-old guy, and his mom says, we have a problem. Like, if he was 12 or 14, like, and his mom said, Jesus, do this, what do you think Jesus is going to say? Yes, ma'am. Like, because he was an obedient child who was all, like, learn. Jesus was an obedient child every time, all the way through. And he always said, yes, mom, and yes, dad. Okay, I wish my children would, but we're working on it. Like, Jesus was always an obedient child, right? He was always a yes mom and a yes dad. Now here, like, he's no longer a child. Like, he's a man, and he's not under his mother's authority outright. So when his mom comes to him with a crisis, he pushes back just a little bit. There's a little bit of a distinction of, I'm no longer your child that you can just tell me what to do. Now, also, note, she's asking him to do a miracle. So it's not exactly like she just asked, she asked him for advice. You know, it's not like she asked him to help them. You need to fix this. This is going to require some supernatural help. And she knows who he is. Mary fully believes that her son is the Son of God and therefore has the power to fix the problem. Like, notice, so Jesus rebukes her just mildly. Ma'am. Like, what's this got to do with us? My hour's not yet come. I'm not ready to tell all of these people that I'm the Son of God. Like, however, his mother, being the slightly pushy woman that she was, because that's how moms are, like, she's slightly more insistent. So Jesus kind of backs off and says, you know, what's this got to do with us? You know, his mother says to the servants, whatever he says, you do it. Okay, so they have to be on board. All right, so she does still put, in my understanding, she still puts him on the spot a little bit. Like, Jesus says, what's this got to do with us? And she looks at the servants and says, whatever he tells you to do, you do it. Like, and whether or not she's the head of the catering, we don't know. But she's given orders at that moment to the servants. And they're going to do whatever Jesus says. Because Mary believes that Jesus can address the problem. Like, she knows Jesus can fix it. She doesn't know how. She doesn't know what he's going to do. Like, she knows he doesn't have a lot of money, so she does know that they came from a poor background. So there's not like, hey, Jesus, go write a check to the winemaker down the street and bring us some more wine. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, whatever he says, you do it. Verse 6, now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 to 30 gallons each. That's a pretty good thing. You're talking about 120, 150 gallons. That's a fair amount. That's, you know, picture 3 55-gallon drums, y'all. Like, that's a significant amount of water. Jesus said to them, fill them to the brim. So they filled them up to the brim. The servants obeyed. They don't know what's going on, but there's an act of faith here in that we have a problem. Like, Mary believes Jesus can fix it, and the servants say, okay, like, we'll do what you say. There's an act of demonstrating their own faith in the potential solution simply in obeying. Like, children, learn well. You don't always have to understand in order to say, yes, Daddy. Like, you don't have to understand in order to say, yes, Daddy. Like, simple obedience is always the best path. Like, you don't have to understand how I'm going to fix it. Like, daughter, this morning, one of the birthday balloons got away last night. Okay, it got away in the stairwell. And my daughter was panicked because it's stuck up in the stairwell and it's up too high to reach. Wait. Like, and she's continuing to pester me. Now, I haven't had any coffee. Like, I haven't even turned off the alarm and walked the dog yet. I mean, like, And my early riser is already up and out. I said, just wait. Just wait. Like, you do not have to know how I am going to fix the problem. It is because, as it turns out, I know more than you do about how the universe works. Like, and she's panicked that the balloon is going to be stuck up there forever. No, it's not. It really isn't. So after I turned off the alarm and walked the dog, I walk back in and I get an extendable duster. It's 12 feet, 8 feet long, or 10 feet long, whatever, man. Whoop, bring the balloon over. I can reach the string. No problem. I got the balloon. Like, crisis averted. Like, but there were tears. Like, over, I'm going to lose the balloon. Like, no, like, you just have to trust me. And when I say wait, just wait. That just means wait. It doesn't mean I'm not going to fix it. It just means I need you to give me a few minutes. Like, these guys act in obedience, and they go fill the water pots. And he said to them, now draw out some of it and take it to the head waiter. Okay. So they do what they're told. They scoop out a little bit of the water. They take it to the head waiter. Now the head waiter, this is the head of catering, tasted the water which had become wine and didn't know where it came from. But the servants who had drawn it knew. And the head waiter called the bridegroom. Like, because these guys brought him some wine. Here, try this. Whoa, that's good. That's real good. Like, and the head waiter calls the bridegroom, the head of the party, who had at some point run out of wine and knew he was in trouble. And he said to the bridegroom, every man serves the good wine first. And when the people have drunk freely, and he serves the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. Like, that Jesus turned the water into wine. That's the first miracle. And like, he doesn't, like, I've been in this scenario once before. And I kind of debated whether or not I would tell this story because I don't want y'all to be offended, but I'm going to run the risk here. Hang on. So, I was in Russia. I was in a village with my friend Alexei on a cultural learning experience. This is language immersion when you get around a bunch of people that don't speak any English. And he was from a village outside the city, so we'd taken the little bus out to the village, and by village, like, it's a village. There's, about 500 people living in little small houses, kind of all packed together. And one of his schoolmates was about to go off to the army, and they have conscripted service in Russia. They go off and serve two years. Everybody does. And unless they pay their bribes, they all go to the service. And so his buddy was turning 18 and going off to the army. And so they were having a celebration for him. Like, they were having a party. It was both 18th birthday and going away party because he was going off to the army. And it's kind of a big deal because the Russian army is not like the American army. A lot of them die in training exercises. As many as 10% of their conscripts don't make it through their 2 years. They're killing off a huge part of their 18-year-olds. I'm just saying. Like, because they don't train safely. It's probably a safe, accurate assessment. So the mamas are all worried that they're never going to see their boy again. Like, the mama's worried that they're, like, the grandma and the mama and the aunts and uncles, they're all worried this kid's not coming home. And we're celebrating, so they're telling stories. Well, like, you can imagine we're all sitting around this big table. They've had a big meal, ate all kinds of strange foods. Like, and then they break out the vodka. And they're going around the table, and they're pouring the vodka around. And, like, here's my little, all right, who am I going to offend here? And so, like, they drink to everything. Like, they drink to, like, so they take their little, like, and they toast this kid over and over and over again. Like, I'm sipping mine, I'm not chugging mine. Mine lasts through like 8 toasts, okay? And they're not, most of them. Now, my translator, thank you, Alex, for not drinking heavily. Alex is staying sober with me because we have to keep our wits about us. But they were not, like, and they're sipping. About halfway through the party, I mean, an hour or 2 hours in, like, I've made it through one little shot glass. Like, and they come back and they refill my glass. Now, it's the next toast. Like, this is the foulest tasting liquid fire I have ever touched. I mean, it was just absolutely awful. Like, and I couldn't figure, I mean, like, vodka's bad enough. Like, this stuff just terrible. Like, And I mean, I couldn't even fake it, you know, like I can't even sip this stuff for the thing. And so at that point they were sloshed enough it didn't matter. And because most of the guests were inebriated, okay, except me and my. I asked him, I said, "What is this? Like, what happened? What did they do?" Well, when the guests were a little bit sloshed, like they ran out of vodka, they ran out of the good stuff. So the host went and got a bottle of spirits out of the cupboard. 97% pure alcohol. You can't even buy that stuff in this country. But it's cheap there. And she just cut it with water. So she just poured them together and cut it down with water to about 40% alcohol or thereabouts. Just absolutely awful. But guess what? None of the guests noticed. Except me and Alex, because we were the ones who were sober. And nobody else noticed. You know why? Because they didn't care. Because the guests served the good at the beginning of the party, because by the end of the party, nobody knows. That's exactly the same scenario. Now, granted, they're drinking wine, not vodka. Okay, there's a difference in those two things. But in a party that lasts a week, they serve the good wine first and the cheap wine separate later. That's the normal custom. And here, Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus makes this wine, and it's good wine. And the head waiter is thoroughly surprised that the bridegroom had saved the good wine for last. Now, yes, it's actual wine. Now, it's not vodka, but can we have an alcohol conversation here? Because this is one of those things that I kind of got to dance around, and I'm a little uncomfortable with, but I'm just going to handle it as best I can. Jesus doesn't turn the wine into grape juice. Okay, that doesn't fit the context of verse 11. Nobody ever got inebriated after drinking freely, in verse 10, and then wouldn't be able to distinguish from the good grape juice from the bad grape juice. You understand? There's an alcoholic component to what Jesus made. And that makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. Okay, because they're Jesus made alcohol. Yes, as it turns out, he did. Okay, and to say that he didn't doesn't do justice to the text. And that makes people uncomfortable. Did Jesus make something that it was possible for people to abuse? Yes. Did Jesus say to those people, therefore you should go and abuse it? No. Okay, those are very different things. And it's also important to understand that in the cultural context that we're talking about, wine did not have the same alcoholic content that it does today. Today's alcoholic beverages run anywhere from 5 to 12% alcohol by volume, depending on which wine you're looking at the grocery store. Okay, trust me, I went and looked. That one's got 8. That one's got 11. That one's got 6. They put on the side how much alcohol they have in them. It would not have had that level of alcohol in it. That we do that with modern 21st century breweries and distilleries. Okay, the likely alcohol content in the wine is somewhere around 2%, because that occurs pretty naturally when you ferment grapes. Now, why would that? In the first century, you don't have sweet tea and lemonade. I'm sorry, those two beverage choices come along much later. They did not make sweet tea or lemonade in the first century. Their beverage choices were pretty much wine, milk, and water. And that was it. I mean, you had wine, milk, and water. The water was not always safe to drink. Because if you look at, say, first century Ephesus, the average life expectancy of someone in first century Ephesus, we know, was about 31, 32 years old. Why? Because they had a purification problem. The water got everybody sick and they died, okay? Because they had a sewage problem and the water around the city was filthy. And they just made themselves sick and they died. When you ferment grapes, you do two things. You make them shelf-stable. Now, if anybody has ever had a child that left their cup of grape juice on the counter for a couple of weeks, what does it look like? Y'all are like, yes, that's happened at our house. Oh, we discovered that sippy. Ooh, how long has that been there? I don't know, but it's thoroughly green, okay? It's got the... it's just lovely in the cup, and you're arguing over who's going to have to clean that mess out. Like, and then you have one of those silent battles where you put it in the sink and you wait for the other spouse to hopefully clean it out. Like, okay. Grape juice in its non-fermented stage is not shelf stable, okay? It doesn't last. Like, you either drink it or you throw it away. Like, fermenting it into wine made it shelf stable. You could seal it in wine skins and keep it for years. Like, 2% alcohol by volume will make wine shelf stable, and you can keep it for years. You can at least save it from one harvest to the next. Well, over the course of the year, you can make your wine shelf stable by fermenting it. Like, we aren't into cheese making yet, so you don't, even on your milk stuff, you got fresh milk, you got water, and you got wine, and that's pretty much the only 3 beverage choices you have. Water's not always the safest thing to drink because it can make you sick. Like, first century wine was a safe beverage to consume. Frankly, it was a way to consume a beverage that wasn't going to make you sick because it'd been fermented, and that takes care of some of the bacteria and the other things that can make you sick. Like, it wasn't the way that we 21st century Americans translate and read wine is probably the best way I can say that. Like, and is it possible to get drunk on the wine? Yes. Like, you would have to consume a heck of a lot of it. You really got to be a lush to get down enough to make you drunk. Like, modern Russians, okay, like, serve kvass. Did you ever drink kvass? What is kvass? Kvass is, yeah, wet bread. It's probably an accurate description. It's rye bread and water that has kind of been fermented a little bit and steeped and then filtered. And it tastes, and they take the rye bread and they burn it black, and then they burn it black in a toaster, and then they make kvass out of it. So it's kind of like burnt wet bread. Like, it's really foul stuff. Like, sorry my Russian friends, it's really not very good. To the American palate, it's pretty offensive. But I had to drink my share of it. Kvass runs about 1% alcohol by volume. Okay, it's generally, like, it's got a little bit in it, like, which makes it shelf stable. Guess what? They let children drink it. Like, lots of kids drink kvass on the street. Like, they're not going to get drunk on it. It does not have enough alcohol in it to harm them or get them inebriated, okay, even though it has a 0.5 to 1% alcohol by volume. Like, and you can brew it on the stovetop. And they do in their apartments. I mean, they brew their stuff, and it's awful. Anyway, I don't recommend tasting it. Only to say, like, a little bit of alcohol is harmless. Like, and frankly, 1-2% alcohol by volume in the wine actually makes it both shelf stable, it makes it safer to drink. Like, Jesus' intent is not to get the guest liquored up and drunk. Okay, that's not why he does this miracle. Like, Jesus' intent is to bless the guests so that the party can carry on without distraction, because the host is going to be embarrassed because he ran out of wine. Like, and he is problem solving for them. Like, and it's real wine. Like, if you drink enough of it, you can get intoxicated. Like, but that wasn't his intent. Like, Jesus' intent is to let the celebration carry on uninhibited. Like, let's not make the minor things a major thing. Oh, we ran out of wine. That's a logistics issue that Jesus can fix pretty easily. Let's just fix logistics so nobody gets distracted from the fact that this wedding celebration is wonderful. That this wedding celebration of a man and a woman is a beautiful thing. And we're not going to get distracted by the food or the water, the drink, the wine. Like, here, yet Jesus turns the water into wine. Like, alcohol consumption for Christians is not the same. Like, my personal stance on this is it's generally unwise. Like, I don't think it's absolutely wrong ever. Like, I think it's generally unwise. It takes about 1 in 7 people statistically who try alcohol become an alcoholic. Okay? There's an awful lot of people, and I generally agree with them, that go, the risk is just too high. Like, that people get tempted into that. My great-grandfather was an alcoholic, okay? And people get tempted into alcoholism and have genetic predispositions and those kinds of things. So the general rule is just, it's not worth it. Like, I had a good buddy going into seminary. Well, he was going into seminary, I was coming out. We were having this conversation about, he discovered the seminary had an alcohol policy that said you could not drink any alcohol while you were in school, which for me was, okay, no big deal. And he's like, I don't know if I can go to a school that won't let me drink my beer. And I went, brother, if the beer has that big a hold on you, you probably don't need to be going to seminary. He let go of that beer and went to seminary, and he's doing well after. It's very hip and very cool in the 21st century to consume, for Christians to think, oh, it's okay to consume alcohol. My take on that is do it with caution, and great caution, and understand that you're going to offend some people in the process. You'll never see me drink in public, because I'm not going to offend anybody. You're not. I'm not going to go buy a beer at the tap room or whatever, because I'm not going to offend the guy down the street who thinks that I shouldn't have a beer. And generally speaking, I don't have beer anyway. I don't like wet bread. I prefer my bread dry with butter. And I don't think that, I think that we live in a culture where alcoholism and whether or not this is okay is a big deal. But I think more often than not, when you get into a text like this, that can really distract you from what John is trying to talk about. Because the focus isn't on whether or not Jesus made wine. It is, Jesus turned the water into wine. The focus is on the humanity of Christ, and that he's at a celebration just like we would be, a part of the community celebrating this marriage. And his simultaneously focuses on his divinity, and he reveals his glory because he has the supernatural ability to turn water into wine. That Jesus has power over the elements. If he can speak the universe into existence, John 1, then in John 2, it's no big deal for him to change the elements from water to wine. That Jesus has the creator ability innate in him. And that's what we're supposed to see in this wedding at Cana. The humanity of Christ in the participation in a wedding, a human festival that we're all having a good time, a compassion for the bridegroom who's in a pinch because he ran out of a beverage, and simultaneously his divine nature where he turns water into wine. Because what we see in the conclusion is what we're supposed to understand. Verse 11, this is the beginning of the signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. What we're supposed to see here is that this turning the water into wine demonstrates Jesus' divinity, that he has power over the elements, and it's the first sign. It's a manifestation of his divine glory, because normal humans don't do this. Normal humans don't take the water and go, here, take this to your master, and it turns into wine in the trip. That doesn't happen. And his disciples, those first 6 guys, their faith just took a jump, because they just observed this Jesus who they've heard teaching do something absolutely miraculous. And the disciples' faith in him as Messiah is growing. What we're supposed to see in John chapter 2 is that Jesus has power over the elements, and that Jesus is divine. That our faith in him ought to grow. That Jesus is normal and human, and that he is at a wedding celebrating with his friends just like we would be. He's just like us. He experiences the same things that we do. He walks through life, and he is both perfectly human and perfectly divine. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I thank you for the life that Christ lived. That he lived a life like we do. That he celebrated at a wedding with his friends and his family, and he enjoyed the delights of their company, and he laughed and had a good time. Lord, I thank you that he is fully divine, and that he has power over the elements, that he can he can change the water into wine. Lord, I thank you that we get to see his humanity and his divinity married together in the text in a way that helps us understand who he was. Lord, I pray that you wouldn't let us get too sidetracked by the tertiary issues, like whether or not this is wine or grape juice, but that whether or not we should focus on, and we could remember that you are both human and God. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to grow in our understanding of who you are and what you're like and why that matters even this week. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.